Welcome to the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Hartley. This podcast exists to equip and inspire your heart-centered leadership. Every week, we bring interviews with some of the greatest heart sets and mindsets on the planet. I hope the heartprint of our time spent together is that it creates new possibilities for you and all those you come into contact with. If you'd like to explore what we could make possible for you, then head to abty.co.uk/connect and book in a free 30-minute call to begin our journey together. I just want to express a huge amount of gratitude to our sponsors, Exhale Coffee. I have been a big fan of Exhale Coffee since meeting Alex and the team back in 2022. Exhale is the first coffee to be sourced, roasted and lab tested specifically to maximize its antioxidant and anti-inflammatory potency. An independent lab test has shown that 1 cup of Exhale Coffee has the same antioxidant power as 1.8 kilos of blueberries or 55 oranges. I'm a huge fan, and Mrs. H loves the decaf, especially because she knows that Exhale use the mountain water decaffeination process, which uses only pure glacial water from the highest mountain in Mexico and no nasty chemicals. Simply head to exhalecoffee.com/ABTY for your special offer. And lastly, before I introduce this week's guest, please do subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It would really help us leave a greater heartprint on this world. On episode 295, what a joy it is to welcome Dr. Ashleigh Moreland to the podcast. Dr. Ashleigh is the founder of the Remind Institute, a space dedicated to helping individuals and leaders evolve into their highest and best selves. As a neurophysiologist, therapist and coach, Ashleigh blends neuroscience, spirituality and emotional intelligence to create transformative experiences for those seeking true growth. I hope this conversation reminds you to deeply integrate your heart, your mind and your soul. Here's to your fullest expression, my friends. It is episode 295 with Dr. Ashleigh Moreland. Dr. Ash, welcome to the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast. How are you?
I'm amazing. I'm so happy to be here with you.
We were just talking. I don't want to do that British thing of like. So I'm never that guy that's like talking about the weather. I don't normally do surface level conversations, but I couldn't help notice how sunny it is where you are at 7 a.m. Like I was like, oh, I need some of that in my life.
We're coming off the back of summer though, so that's helpful.
Yeah, where are you in the world, my friend?
I am in Melbourne, Victoria, in Australia, and it is the southern state, so on the colder side of Australia, but we tend to be known for the extremes. So extreme hot, extreme cold. Very rarely do we sit in the middle.
Yeah. Well, this is the glory of the internet. You and I have been connected for some time, and yeah, we were just talking like the what you represent in the world, the people you serve, is absolutely in line with what we're all about here at Always Better Than Yesterday. We're going to talk a little bit about leadership, talk a bit about parenting, all the goodness around neuroscience, and hopefully leave our listeners a little bit more regulated, calm, inspired, equipped to go and be those heart-centered leaders they know they can be.
Yeah, I love that.
What's your journey into becoming a heart-centered leader, a self-declared heart-centered leader? What's in your journey to back to the heart?
Trauma.
Right.
Is that the common answer?
It's the wise answer. It's the true answer.
Yeah, honestly, I grew up in a really volatile household, and my whole family history, like intergenerationally, and obviously I didn't understand this at the time because it was just my family and I thought all families were like that. But the experiences that I had in my early life, so I also grew up Lutheran. I grew up in the Lutheran church and went to Lutheran primary schools and all this kind of stuff. And in my early life, I actually just got really angry with God when I was around 12. And I don't think I got angry with God. I got angry with the people who were representing God, who were representing God in a way that made me imagine this angry man with a beard in the clouds, just constantly being mad at me, telling me that I was naughty and wrong and bad and like all these things, right? And so when I declared that the second that I finished school, I would be gone. I didn't want to stay in my hometown where I grew up. And I was going to get away from this family, and I was going to get away from these people, and I was going to go and live a good life. So when I was 16 years old, I moved 23 hours away from my family.
Wow.
And started at a university here in Melbourne. And I think over a period of time, when I was 18, I was diagnosed with a pituitary tumor. And again, I was quite angry. I felt like it wasn't fair. Like I had done all this good and I was a good person and I ate veggies and I exercised. Like I really
Why me?
Yes, it was. It was this whole story. Anyway, so what I was studying at university was all around human performance, and I ended up getting into neuroscience. And I just thought the other flip side of this was I had struggled. I was a customer of the mental health system for a very, very, very long time. And through studying neuroscience, I just thought, you know what, if we can change the brain, if it's true that we can change the brain, then surely we can just fix all of this. And it wasn't until, journeying this path, I was in a really unhealthy marriage. I had become a mum. I had done my PhD in this time. And eventually I had done life on my own terms for so long that I reached a point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. And you've probably heard that story a million times. Those are some of my favorite words that can come out of anyone's mouth ever. Because I think that moment of I can't do this anymore was a forced surrender. To go, all right, I've tried to do it my way. Nothing worked. And there was so much anger. At the universe, at God, just this injustice, and it's not fair. And from that moment, that I can't do this anymore moment, I feel like my life just did a full 180 and started going in the complete opposite direction. That softened me. And I think the first time that I had picked up a Bible since I was 12 years old, I was 30. And I opened it up just randomly to any page. And I came across love your neighbor as you love yourself. And I slammed it shut because at that time, my neighbors were keeping me up till 3 o'clock in the morning. They were the most horrible neighbors I'd ever had.
Oh, the irony.
And I was like, how am I supposed to love them? How am I supposed to do that? And so that's really where it started, that moment of I can't do this anymore. And then over a period of about 6 months, just sign after sign after sign after sign leading me in this direction. And then finally reaching that point of exploring love. What did love mean? Because it sure as heck wasn't what I was taught it meant when I was a child. And even on the flip side of that, how do I love myself? Because if I saw someone who loved themselves, I used to think, oh, they're full of themselves. They're egotistic. They think they're better than everyone else. I don't want to do that. So that's kind of how it all started. And then it was just this, the picture that's coming into my mind, the like meat tenderizers. Like God had to soften my heart, but he did it with a damn meat tenderizer.
Right. And
he tenderized my heart well and truly, but oh my gosh, it felt brutal.
Well, I've said this on the podcast a number of times. There's the scripture where Paul pleads to God to remove the thorns from his flesh. And I read the Passion Translation. It's a bit more poetic. It's not necessarily a Bible that you'd go studying, but it's poetic. And the traditional response is, in your weakness, you're made strong. But in the Passion Translation, it says, in your weakness, you will find my fullest expression.
Yes.
I'm like, oh, yes. Like it's in the wounds, it's in the trauma, it's in the weakness, and it's in the surrendering to that we actually find what we're fully capable of, who we fully, truly are in our opportunity to be supported by that which is greater than ourselves.
Exactly. And I think it's so beautiful, which is why I say one of my favorite phrases when I hear come out of someone's mouth, I know they're about to have a breakthrough, is I can't do this anymore. I literally use it in my coaching, in my onboarding. I have a scale from 1 to 10 and I'm like, it's a very scientific scale, Mrs. PhD here, but on the scale of 1 to 10 on the I can't do this anymore scale, where are you?
Yes.
Because in my experience, if someone is less than an 8 out of 10, the discomfort or the pain of their current experience is not great enough to step into the fear and discomfort of change.
Which explains why This
Yeah,
explains why people are so familiar with living lives that are less than fulfilling
that's
because they're
right.
around about a six. It's like a
Yeah,
suffering, daily
yeah,
suffering, but you've not got to that point where you've gone down tools, way flag.
yeah,
What,
exactly.
what
And I,
stops
I just
people
think
getting
that's
there?
such a beautiful thing.
Why do you think? Why do you think people continue to live the lives of sixes, and why do we not sort of like get to that point? Is it a mindset thing? Is it a weakness thing? Is it a pride thing? Like, what are your experiences of people living at sixes and sevens?
Look, I feel we're kind of biologically wired for familiarity and
Yeah,
repetition. So if
yeah.
you think about neurologically, when I think about the stages of learning, and I used to teach on skill acquisition and learning and the neuroscience of learning at uni. So I've thought about this deeply. And I see that it's a spectrum, right? So when we first learn a new skill, it's very cognitive. It requires a lot of brain input, a lot of processing of information. And then on the other end of the spectrum is autonomous. And autonomous means we're basically just working off an encoded pattern that we just press go and the whole thing just plays out. And so it's highly efficient. And as animals, we are like biologically wired for efficiency and survival.
Mm, mm.
And so it's kind of like, have you ever walked faster and faster and faster and faster until such a point where you can't walk any faster and you have to actually break into a run? Kind of works in a similar way where the body has a almost a natural set point where it prioritizes efficiency
Mm,
over outcome. And so when it comes to this, the familiarity is
yeah.
so efficient because it requires almost no neurological input. It's all
Mm,
just based on programming. We press go, it happens, it's habitual, and we're wired for that. And so
yeah.
to change, we actually have to unwire and rewire, which, first of all, is it takes a lot of load.
Mm,
It's very inefficient. And second of all, to the nervous system, change feels unsafe. And so, unless something, and this is what I
yeah.
say, like two things will promote change, either pain or pleasure. So, on the I can't do this anymore scale, we're basically going from a crisis of going, I can't do this anymore. This is really painful. I would take the pain over, like the pain of change over continuing this pain. And the
Mm,
other option is pleasure. So, let's say we get our dream job and there's purpose and there's passion in it, then moving towards that purpose and passion will, I guess, give us the leverage that we need to make the change.
yeah, and new
So,
experiences, new patterns, which can then
yeah,
slow over time create new programs with which to run
that's
from and
right.
operate. But it comes down to
Exactly.
this phrase: "Better the devil you know," right? It's
Absolutely. It's true.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, for me, I didn't know any different other than the
Mm,
family that I had because that was the family that I had. And I remember I had a client once who, and I'm not sharing out of school here. We did a an interview that was publicly shared, but she's a trans woman, and so born male, and was born into a family of drug abuse and violence and all this sort of stuff. And when I said to her, if you go back to that child version of you, what did they need? Like from the version of you that you are today, what did that child
mm,
need? And she said, they just needed to know that this wasn't normal, that there was love, there was gentleness, there was compassion. Like, and I'm paraphrasing here, but
yeah.
essentially, like she said, she was in school to study HR for the first time that she ever realized that the family she grew up in wasn't what everyone experienced. And
Mm,
so if we don't know, we can't do any differently.
yeah. It's powerful, isn't it? It's powerful. I've had similar realizations, different scales, but just different, but that realization is like, wow, like that was a unique set of circumstances when I like the no shit Sherlock approach, which is when I look at the totality of my life and all the situations, then there's just no surprise I am the way I am, you know? And
Yeah,
that goes the same with
exactly.
anybody when you have compassion. If you stack up the experiences and the environments that we've been a byproduct of over the years, you think, oh, no shit.
Yeah,
and
totally.
and I guess there's real power for me, like my healing journey and my wholeness as a leader and as a parent comes from when I look into that and I'm like,
Mm,
oh, I wouldn't say it's like self-love, but more self-acceptance, like less
yes,
self-rejection, where I'm like,
yes.
wow, like there,
Understanding.
I am a part of light and I'm capable of light and dark. I have both within me, and
Yeah.
and I if I if I deny the shadow and the darkness, then that kind of comes out when I least expect it. But the great healing has come from one when I've looked into that and gone, oh, I understand how that might have got there. I
Yes,
understand how that might come
exactly.
out. You know,
Yes. And also I love the concept that darkness is merely the absence of light. And
yes.
so the more that we lean into our light, the more that I call it a process of unbecoming. So no matter who the
Mm.
client is, first of all, we have to understand who we are and how we got there.
Mhm.
And then we peel back the layers and unbecome who our circumstances created us to be, who our
Mm.
family of origin created us to be, who our trauma created us to be, who the expectations and obligations and all of these things
Yeah.
created us to be. And when we peel back those layers and unbecome all of those things, then we are the most authentic, truest version of us who God created us to be. And that's light. You
Mm.
know, I hate to do the cliche love and light thing, but it is, it's pure love. And so
Yes.
what I find is that when we can unbecome and do that really messy work of unbecoming who we had to become in order to survive, then we have this overwhelming expression of pure love light, so that when those areas of darkness are revealed, and I sort of
Mm.
talk about using life as your diagnostic tool, whether you're a parent, whether you're a leader, whether you're in a relationship, they're the most common areas where life is our diagnostic tool. But it's the times, the moments where we feel that dysregulation come up in our system, we
Mm.
feel that emotional response, we feel that trigger. That is literally the answer to our prayer of going, reveal to me where I'm not emotionally free, reveal to me where there is an absence of love and light within my heart. And that is showing us. So then we know where to pour that love into those hurt spaces and those
Mm.
unforgiven spaces and those spaces of shame or guilt or fear or whatever it is. So that's one of my favorite concepts, is just more light, more light, more light.
Mm. Yes, and amen to that. This is I'm enjoying this conversation, and you said earlier about the scripture about love your neighbor as yourself, and it's that second part that most people forget. It's the as yourself, and
Yes.
this idea that we are one, we are the body, we are, we're not separate. But I'd love to kind of understand: is there a moment in your life where that fully clicked for you, like that love of self, understanding, realization, despite all
Oh,
the parts, despite all the reasons why you
yeah.
might be unlovable, when that really was just like, yeah, I got it.
Yeah, it was in worship at church one day, and we were singing that song, Show Me Your Face, Lord. And just like a punch in the stomach, he said, You show me yours. And I was on my knees weeping, because I had this image in my mind of me going like this, going, I don't want you to see me.
Yeah,
I'm not worthy of being seen by you.
yeah.
And that, like, if you asked me, was there a moment, that was the moment, and it just broke me. um and then, reflecting back, how did I get to that point of believing that I wasn't worthy of love, or wasn't
Mhm.
worthy of being seen, or whatever. It obviously came from childhood, and I'm so fortunate that my father's in his 60s is so open to having really raw and vulnerable conversations. So the man that he is now in his 60s
Mm,
is
mm,
not the man who abused me when I was a child. And I can converse and connect with the man he is in his 60s, reflecting on the experiences that I had as a young child at the hands of the man that he was 30 years ago, who was deeply hurting, who was using alcohol to kind of self-soothe and numb out. And the craziest thing was, I had my first suicidal attempt at 14, and I had written this huge letter. And in the letter, I wrote about how all I wanted was for my dad to love me. And I wrote all these examples of the evidence that he didn't love me. And we had an electrical fire many, many, many years later. I had already moved out of home, and the very few things that were salvageable, they put in a couple of boxes and whatever. And anyway, my dad, I saw him on Father's Day just a few years ago, and he had gone through the boxes in the shed from that fire all those years ago, and he found the letter.
Wow.
And he read it, and it broke him, because he said, Ash, all of the things that you saw as me not loving you was me loving you in the only way that I knew how. I was hard on you because I wanted more for your life than I ever had. I did this because I wanted this for you, and I didn't know any other way to support you to get that. And it just opened up this like whole conversation about going, oh my gosh. But then it helped me to relate to God, because sometimes God will lead me down a painful path, not because he doesn't love me, but because he loves me enough to show me that pain, because that he knows me. He knows that's what's going to take for me to surrender. And I think, that God doesn't punish us for condemnation, but he he wants us to be more like Jesus. And so he has to show us and reveal to us where we're not, which is not very gentle. So it's like this whole entire...
That's an incredible story. Like, that's so powerful. And, we are all just flawed. We fall short, we stumble, and especially in that kind of parent-child dynamic, we look up to our parents, we think they've got it figured out, therefore we must be the ones that, like, the stories that we then to start to live with. Like, if there's anything, it's about... And I'd love to know how you're using some of these things to create new possibilities, like the ripple effect. That's what it all comes down to, right? Purpose of pain is for us to look at that and go, what have I been given? What has been crafted in my heart to be so compassionate? I can meet others at the depths that I've met myself now. And I've been deep, right? We've been deep, we've been talking.
Yeah.
Now we're capable of meeting others at that depth. Like, that's how we transform that pain into purpose. Like, because I imagine you're helping parents now have, conversations that bridge hearts in ways that you'd have loved to have had happen all those years ago.
Absolutely. And I think there's a few things to that. One is, I have people say to me all the time, like, I don't know how you can work with them, like as in certain clients who have done really horrific things. Because the thing about my work is that, yes, I was a victim of trauma, but equally, I perpetrated trauma to people through my own hurt. And that's the thing that I have really deeply understood, which my journey of forgiveness, in being worthy of forgiveness from our Heavenly Father to equally forgiving my earthly father, is that people who perpetrate were victims first. And it is not so the thing of love your neighbor as you love yourself, where this took me was, that's really easy to do when your neighbor is friendly and heterosexual and takes your bins in on bin night. Like, that's so easy to do. But what if your neighbor was a pedophile? How do you love them? And what if your neighbor, I don't know, keyed your car? What if they were angry at you and behaved in an unloving way? How do you love them? And what does that reveal about the conditions in our own heart that we place on others? And so that journey of learning to love took me so deep that it doesn't mean to say that I absolutely don't endorse behaviors or anything like that, but it's taught me to be able to hold a heart posture that is open, one of compassion and grace for people that the rest of society might not be able to do. And it's so amazing how healing that is. And I see that as God will use me and my open heart to reach them. And I think that is really, really powerful. And recognizing that no one wakes up every day, especially from a parenting perspective, parents don't wake up every day and go, how can I screw up my kids today? Just don't do that. But unconsciousness means to not see. It's a blind spot. And it's the little things that, a mobile phone is one of the biggest things that will perpetuate trauma in the next generation, because when our attentional focus is on that mobile phone, it's not with them. And so there's this absence. There's a physical presence, but there's an emotional and an energetic absence that the soul recognizes. And so I asked my kids, I said to my daughter, we were just playing dolls one day, super informal chat. And I said to her, sweetheart, she's 8 for reference. I said, sweetheart, do you ever feel like mummy cares about anything else more than you? And she said, yeah, sometimes. There was no emotion in it. That was the amazing thing. She goes, yeah, sometimes. And I said, oh, wow, that's really surprising to me. Can you help me understand when that is or what it is? And she said, well, sometimes I really want your attention, but you're working on your laptop. And sometimes I feel like your laptop is more important to you than me. And she just said it so casually, so, whatever.
The wisdom of children.
And inside, I felt like I had been punched in the stomach.
Yeah.
Because that's never my intention. Like, I would never wake up and go, my work is more important to me than my child. But through her lived experience and through my unconscious behaviors, that was the message that I was sending her.
Yeah.
So a lot of this is about awareness.
Yeah. Because there's no judgment to that, is there? There's no judgment to that. There's not saying you're, because like you say, but there is that ego that will come up and go, well, I need to do that and I need to do this. And well, I can't not work. And it's not about the ego stories, right? It's about sitting with the realization. Is that the story that we want them to have?
And does it make it worth it? Like, let's say that was the thing that resulted in our kids needing therapy as adults. Was that worth it? And I have this conversation with my kids all the time. Like, it's true. It's the balance between helping children who don't have a frame of reference of the world to understand the way that the world works, which is there's an economy, there's bills to pay, like there's realities, right? Especially with the rising cost of living. But equally, there is a responsibility to balance that out with how, if they were feeling really seen, heard, and valued, what would that look, feel, and sound like? That's the question I ask. And for me, I said that to my daughter. I said, oh, wow, that's really surprising. Thank you for sharing that with me. If I still had to work on my computer, but you knew that you were more important to me than my computer, what would that look like for you? What do you need from me? And she said, well, I just need that if I can ask for your attention, then you put it away. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so easy. And so sometimes we overanalyze and overthink it and think that we have to be available for 20 hours a day and every school drop off and every school pick up and home cooked meals and all this stuff to be the good parent that we're projecting on ourselves.
Yeah.
But 9 times out of 10, it's so much more simple than that.
Yeah.
And she's not asking me not to work. She's not asking me to never be on my computer, but she is saying, if I need your attention, can I please interrupt you? Can I please come and tell you that I need your attention? Which is absolutely fine.
Again, it's that opening the chambers of our heart, having that brave conversation. And that's harder to do if we're judging ourselves as parents, or we thought like whatever programs are running us, whether it's the I can't be vulnerable or I can't make mistakes or I can't this, that's the within us that's going to mean that I'm more defensive and not probably wanting to hear what they might have to say.
That's right.
Yeah, like it's a courageous thing to do, but so powerful when you have those. My children are 12 and 9, and I sometimes come away from my children and think, wow, like wisdom, like wow, like it's so simple, like sometimes, and we complicate things, and Yeah, I find that really, really powerful. Is there a certain kind of rituals, routines, or anything like that that you have in place in your family to really nourish and nurture this sense of connection that you've got on and family identity?
Yeah. One is self. I think it always starts with self. And like you just said, the risk of ego coming in, for me
Yeah.
personally, it's not so much like this now, but particularly early in my journey, there was stuff that I had to be willing to see about myself, about the way that I had been as a parent, the way that I had been as a wife, even asking myself the question, if I was married to me, would I feel seen and heard? Oh, I had some corrections to make, just little corrections to make. But something that I've learned in my own journey, which is the number one thing in my life, is if I don't self-reflect and hold the mirror up to myself,
Yeah.
someone else will do it for me. And it always hurts more when they do it than it does when I do it. And so if I don't hold the mirror up and ask
Yeah.
myself those
Yeah. Yeah.
reflective questions and reveal in my quiet time
Yeah.
what's how are my behaviors playing out, and where did I go wrong, and where was I not like Christ in that situation? And even with my team, like where did my team in my company, where did I overshare this, or where did I not give them transparency there? If I don't hold the mirror up, they will. And they
Mm.
will leave my business, or they will start underperforming, or they will, like, it'll start to have consequences. So, one of my most precious routines and rituals is just this process of self reflection. And that used to be very rigid, like I'd set aside time to do that. Now, where I'm at in my journey is that it's more fluid. And like I said before, using life as my diagnostic tool,
Yeah.
where I have a note in my phone. It's nothing spectacular, but the note in my phone says everything is an opportunity for healing if you allow it to be. And so
Mm.
anytime I feel frustration, anytime I feel resentment, anytime I feel insecure, anytime that I have a reaction or a judgment about something, I note it down and I go,
Mm.
what was that? This is for me to explore. Take me deeper into that. So, above and beyond anything, even at the family level, my practice of commitment to self reflection, and so self reflection after the moment, but self awareness in a moment,
Mm.
is by far the biggest catalyst for presence and connection as a family unit.
Mm.
Then, for a connection as a family unit, something my son, when he was young, like one, had really, really severe adverse reaction to some immunizations, and it played out sleep. He became allergic to a whole heap of different foods and all kinds of stuff. But behaviorally, he regressed massively. And as a result of that, we ended up in one of the most amazing programs. It was 12 weeks, called Parent-Child Interaction Therapy. And I learned so much from that. And one of the things that we still do to this day is they taught us about what we call special time. And they said, literally, it might be 5 minutes a day. But for those 5 minutes a day, no devices, no distractions, no nothing. Let the child lead. You talk about what they want to talk about.
Mm.
You do whatever they want to do. And for me, that meant I had to pretend to have my nappy changed by my little daughter for like 6 months.
Yeah.
I had to lay down on my back and she would pretend to change my nappy. That's what she wanted to do. She wanted to role play mums and babies where she was the mum. But that special time is something that's really sacred for us. So at the kids' bedtime every night, and now we have SWATsies because I'm remarried. So my husband will lay with one child and I will lay with the other. And that's just, they know every night that's their time where they get to unpack, they get to tell me about their day, or tell me about the game that they're playing, or the book they're reading, and the things that come up is unbelievable. I think that
Mm.
is the most powerful ritual because it's predictable. They get it
Mm.
every day. And only recently I bought, have you heard of the talking points cards?
Yep.
Yeah. So we bought huge collection of the talking points cards. We have them next to the dining table.
Yeah.
And so now we just pull a card and we chat about that at dinner every night. So sitting together at the table and eating dinner together is, again, another family ritual that no matter what, as much as possible, it's getting harder with like kids' sports and things that are going on, but as much as possible, we prioritize sharing a meal together and connecting and having those conversations. And they're probably our family stuff.
That's so powerful, isn't it? So powerful. There was a point in your life where you shut the Bible, you didn't open it for a long time. What turned you back on to your faith? What got that back on for God?
This is really contentious because I say it's contentious because I've copped the most flack from Christians, interestingly.
Oh, okay.
And it was actually during really early COVID, like first year of COVID, Melbourne was the most locked down city in the whole world. And it was brutal. Like we had armed military walking past our houses to make sure we weren't going out. And like, it was crazy.
Wow.
And during that time, I started having these really spiritual experiences, and I was having visions and like crazy. I knew it was in the spirit realm, and I wasn't under the influence of anything. I definitely was awake. It wasn't like I was having a dream, but it started with these spiritual visions. And I think because I was so anti-church and anti-God, I was exploring elsewhere. So I ended up like quite deep into occult practices. I did all of these kind of fringe spirituality things. And eventually my grandfather passed away, and my grandfather was the head of the family where I'd experienced a lot of religious trauma as a child. And I chose not to go to his funeral. And I went camping instead. Again, had a lot of spiritual experiences while I was camping. And then when I got home, I was sitting on my bed, and plain as anything, I heard, "You have to go to church." And I laughed out loud. I was like, what? It kind of sounds like you just said, "I have to go to church." That is not happening. That's not happening. And then I got it again, plain as anything. And I was like, okay, this is weird. And I literally got on Google and I wrote, "What do you wear to church?" Because I was like, I don't even know what like, how does this even work? What do you wear to church? And like, and then so my now husband, we had separated at that time because he was like, "No, you're playing with some spiritual stuff that I don't want any part in. I feel that stuff is dangerous and all that." So anyway, he ended up speaking to me, and I said, "This is going to sound really weird, but I think I have to go to church." And he said to me, "If you go, I'll go." And so we ended up going to this church 45 minutes away from home because I didn't want to go near where I lived in case anyone saw me and thought I was a massive weirdo. And the church that we went to 45 minutes from my house had 3 services every Sunday. We went to the middle one, and he preached that day on the exact reason I walked away from the church when I was 12. Including the context of the farmers. Like I grew up in a small farming district where church was basically the place that they just went for a break and to get dressed up on a Sunday, like a social event. But it was very religious, and it just reminds me of Nicodemus, like that religious. They knew the law, they knew the rules, they followed the rules, but their hearts were so hardened.
An intellectual faith.
Yes. And at the level of intellect, they were completely blinded to their unChristlikeness. And I think that was the thing that turned me off, because I was like, well, this doesn't resonate for me. Anyway, so that got
righteousness,
me back to
isn't it? I think it's that type of faith for me is about, I have a faith that makes me feel righteous as opposed to relational.
Yes. And, I talk about this where we talk about, if we have to hand something over to God, we can do it. But if we feel the resistance to doing it in our body, and we really don't want to do it, but we do it so that we can tick the box and say, "See, I followed the rules." You might as well not have done it in the first place, because God doesn't want our practical box ticking obedience. He wants our heart. And I think they're different things. So anyway, after that first time I went to church, my jaw was on the ground the entire time going, I felt like there was a spotlight on me. And we never stopped. We went back, and it just really unfolded so quickly for me, because my husband grew up in a Baptist church, which was very theological. We joke that he grew up with God the Father, Jesus the Son, and the Holy Bible. Anything to do with the Spirit, like Holy Spirit was the weird uncle that no one spoke about. Whereas I had this huge spiritual experience, and I was comfortable with the Holy Spirit and God, but I had to get to know Jesus. And so we're coming from two different ends of the spectrum. And I feel that God uses us powerfully because of that. And so he reads the word and I guess draws near to God through reading the word, whereas I feel like I draw nearer to God in my spiritual relationship with him, and the word validates that, if that makes sense.
100%. Yeah. And I think, you know, I was once in a library and there was an entire religion section, and I was just I remember standing in front of it and going, all of these books are pointless if we do not have a faith at the heart level, right? Because
that's right.
I came to faith. This is the last thing I ever wanted, right? I was a man of science. As the last thing I ever wanted to do was just a man on the cloud. Yeah, again, it comes from like that letting down in the formative years, right? The last thing I want to do is just a man with a beard on the cloud. And then I had a moment in a church where my entire body caught fire, and I knew something had happened. And all I did was I went back to my wife in the chairs and I just declared, look, I feel like a child of God, and I don't want to talk about this ever again, you know. And that was a moment where I was like, something's just happened. Something's just happened. I can't deny. Now my learning and my reading becomes about, what was that? How do I learn more about that? Okay, something's got my attention. Something's changed. I feel different. I feel like a part of my heart has been healed. What was that? And then the book is like, well, that kind of makes sense because I'm learning things in different spaces. But to try and get to a level of heart, like heart yielded. Like I love some of the Old Testament where it talks about, I think it was David is just a man yielded to God. His heart was yielded, like that kind of faith. Like he's so poetic with the way that he with his surrender. I think, yeah, like I would never have gotten to that place through intellect and reasoning alone. I just wouldn't have yielded. I wouldn't have surrendered. I wouldn't be so devoted if I hadn't have had a sensory feeling relationship experience.
That's exactly right. 100%. And I think one of the most beautiful things in my experience is that God demonstrates the way that he reaches us, that he knows each of us individually. And I think for me, my background being neuroscience, and then my understanding. So one of my biggest gripes, and God took me on this huge journey that, as I said, I was a customer of the mental health system for 20 years. But my understanding was that mental illness was just in the brain, and it was a chemical imbalance in the brain. And here, just take these medications that alter the physiology of the chemicals in your brain and you'll be better. But if you Google mental, like the definition of mental, it actually is relating to the mind. In Romans 12:2, it says, do not conform to the patterns of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And so I really started to dig deeper and go, hang on a second, what if, just hypothetically, what if the brain and the mind are not the same thing? What if we talk about the brain? And I did a whole entire PhD on neuroplasticity because I was like, well, if the brain's the problem, then all we've got to do is change the brain. Turns out that's not the answer, because we are mind, body, and spirit. And then I was like, oh, but the brain is part of the body. Oh, okay. The mind is separate to the body. So if the mind is not the brain, then what is it? And how do they interrelate? And so this really took me, which is why I say it's a bit contentious, because the things that I have learned is the combination of understanding spiritual things that's not necessarily taught in the Bible, but is absolutely spoken about and referenced. But I would say 99% of people would miss it just because they don't understand even the words mind, world is metaphysical, earth is physical, world is metaphysical. And so I find that just this deep understanding and the revelation of the word that comes from God reaching me in a way that only he knew that I would go down these rabbit holes, and he revealed himself to me through these things. And I went through a bit of actually off the back of that, the company that I founded is called the Mind Institute, which is based off Romans 12:2. So I help people to understand what their patterns are. So the patterns of the world, their belief systems, their judgments, their morals, their values, all of these things that not only the world, but their childhood, the school system, everything else has kind of built them to be their operating system. And then the Be Transformed by the Renewing of Your Mind is about restoring our mind back to truth. So if we are seeing life through these deception goggles, I call them the wrong.com optom lenses, that's based off our own hurt and our own past experiences. But God doesn't see it through hurt. He sees it through love. And so everything in Remind is about helping people to see life through truth. And I really felt like this fear of judgment, again, of the Christian community, because I don't preach Jesus. I don't preach God. I don't preach any of these things, but I speak truth, uppercase T, truth. And I really wrestled with that. And I thought, what came through to me was that my business is not Christian, I am. And so it's up to me to have the relationship with God, but he knows how to meet the people that I work with. It's not up to me to say Jesus loves you, because for me 7 years ago, if someone had have said that to me, I would have never spoken to them again. Right?
Yeah.
So like for me, I just go, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful, because he knows what people need.
Yes.
And it's not up to me to go and ram the Bible down people's throats and ram Jesus. Like Jesus wasn't there telling everyone how good he was and all that. He just lived it. He embodied it.
The most powerful commandment to me is they will know you are my followers by the way you love people.
That's right.
That has to be our testimony. That has to be, and then people go, "Wow!" And then we point to a different source. Not a worldly source, a different source.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm with you on the non-preachy side of things. I like sharing insights and revelations and things like that. But yeah, I guess one of the things in my past is I've always felt the need to over justify if like people don't believe what I believe. I've always felt this urge to, and someone just said the truth does not need you to defend it. I'm like, yes,
I love that.
Remind myself every day that the truth does not need me to defend it. Like,
yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and I think that allows me and it frees me to love people in a way that they need to be loved in a way that I can.
Yeah, I love that. Shane, do you know Shane Willard? Have you come across any of his work? Oh man, he's one of my favorite preachers. He's got a psychology background and he just speaks so much truth. And one of his statements that really resonates with me is, let your life be the epistle for all to read.
Yeah.
And that resonates for me. It's like, God, use my hands and my feet and my lips, work through me, speak through me. And you know what? Sometimes, like 1% of the time, I feel called and compelled to share something to someone that I'm feeling God wants to say to them.
Yeah.
But 99% of the time, it's the difference between like saying, you know, Satan wants to steal, kill, and destroy your future by making you not do Instagram reels and giving you this fear of being seen, right? Versus something like, your fear of being seen is holding you back in your business. It's just language that changes, except one alienates someone who doesn't have an emotional connection to the theology behind it, whereas another is freeing someone and reaching them in a way that feels safe for them. And so it's really a language thing. And even, I don't get offended when I can see the fruits of relationship with God in someone's life, but they don't know God's name, or they might say the universe or something like that. I refuse to believe that we serve a God who would be like, well, you didn't get my name right, so off the hell you go.
100%.
I can't reconcile that. So
No.
I feel like there's way more important things, and it's about the heart posture and the positioning of our heart and our willingness to lay that down and to not eliminate ego. It's not about that, but to have that grace and that compassion and that gentleness and kindness.
100%.
And
I'm tending to, I'm at a point in my life, in my journey, where I've read a lot of the books that have been taken out of the Bible, because I'm that kind of kid that's just like, why were they taken out? Like, why? Why? I want to learn from people that spent time with Jesus. Like, why would you take away these people? I don't get it. I don't understand it. And I guess that's a gift for me, having not grown up within the institution, right? Because I would just follow the institution, and I'm like, why? Well, why is that? And even to the point now where I'm like, half of that New Testament stuff's written by a guy that never met him. I'm gonna just, for now, simplistically, just spend my time reading the red bits. I want to simplify my faith by going, what is the guy that is a king of all kings?
This is all about, say.
Yeah, 100%. Let me just go back to the simplicity of what was he quoted as saying? How did he live? What did he do? And I sometimes in a world that gets a little bit too polarized, I just bring it down. What did he simply say? They will know you're my followers by the way that you love people. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, or your mind, or your soul. Go love your neighbor as yourself. Right, okay, cool. That simplifies things.
Yeah.
Not easy, but it simplifies.
That's what I was going to say. It simplifies it in understanding, but not necessarily in execution. And it's so funny. My son is into anime. He's almost 12. I think our kids are very close in age. He's almost 12, and he's very into anime and manga. And he asks me these hypothetical questions, and I don't remember the language for it, but ultimately he's like, all right, I want you to imagine that each character has its own, I think it's called a domain or something, and it's like its own little world, and each world has its own superpower, which has attack power and defense power. What would yours be in this war of the kind of worlds? And I said to him, that's so easy. Love. And he goes, don't be stupid, Mum, you can't win a war with love. And I said, I red team that. Let's battle test that. I want you to imagine that in my world, I have a radius, like a circumference around it at a certain radius, where anyone who comes in proximity to that sees themselves the way God sees them.
Yeah.
Tell me they would still be able to harm another. Tell me they would still be able to continue with their war. Tell me they would still be able to do all these things. And he's like, oh my gosh, I think you got me.
Damn it.
He had no rebuttal. And so that's my prayer, is like, God, help us to see ourselves the way you see us, first and foremost, which is the root of my work. Like, all of our programs are about holding the mirror up. And that's challenging for people. Like, clients often say to me, I really don't like you right now. And I go, I'm okay with that. I can handle that. But you not liking me is the gateway to you loving you. So I don't need you to like me. I'm okay with that. But let me be unliked so that you can unlock your love for you. And when you can unlock your love for you, you can unlock your love for others.
Yeah.
So my prayer is for people to see themselves the way God sees them, and then to be able to unlock seeing others. Because when we can see others, we don't see offense, we see hurt. And the way that we meet hurt is very different to the way that we meet offense or attack. So
That's really powerful. How can people connect with you? How can they find out more about your work and get involved in your services?
Yeah, well, we're online as Remind Institute, so we'll pop the links and stuff, I'm guessing, below. Remind Institute is the company that I founded. It's not me, it's separate from me, but I kind of feel like I'm the custodian or the steward of that. So we have programs more aimed at everyday general population, so mental health, relationships, parenting, all that kind of stuff. And then me personally, I more work in the leadership development, more on the what's holding you back from thriving and living in the fulfillment of your purpose and potential, rather than just not suffering and living a living hell anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can reach me on any of the socials, email, anywhere you want.
Love it. I'll make sure all those links are in the show notes. One of the things I wanted to talk to you, I'm going to talk to you about legacy in a second, but I think I saw something recently that you've equally been touched by the legend that is Kerwin Rae. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. What sort of impact did that great man have on you?
I was in his coaching program for 2.5 years,
Wow. Wow.
and I I had a very interesting experience last year. So I was led through an experience where I had to process significant grief, a grief that I've never experienced ever before in my life. And the irony is that that person is actually still alive. It's just that I didn't know whether they would or wouldn't be.
Mm.
And that taught me a lot about grief. And so when Kerwin passed away, I actually felt guilt because I didn't feel grief. I didn't feel the typical sadness and grief that I would have expected to feel. And I think me 10 months prior would have been really crippled by.
Mm.
And one of the biggest things that I think contributed to that is that his coaching program is still running. It's still having a profound impact. His teachings will continue to be around for many, 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 many years. And I felt inspired by that to go. He always spoke about he spoke about his mission to Mars, his 300-year mission, and he was very open about going, this mission is bigger than me, but it has to be, because if it's dependent on me and limited to my life on this planet, well then I'm not aiming high enough. That's not legacy. And
Mm.
so I'm really inspired by that, in going, whatever we're doing has to be bigger than us. And I think when it is bigger than us, I also read at the same time, 10x is easier than 2x. Have you ever read that?
Nope.
It was such, I don't know if it was just the timing of it all, but it was the exact book that I needed to read at the exact time. And it was about thinking bigger, that if you just want to double your impact, then you're just going to work harder doing what you're already doing. But if you want to 10x your impact, what you're doing won't work.
Mm.
You have to completely change the script of what you're doing. And that's what Kerwin did. And that's what Kerwin taught us. So, oh man, I'm so, so, so grateful and indebted for a man who, yeah, did have such a big impact and taught me about legacy and the ripple effect. So,
Yeah, God bless that man. I've been a follower of his a long time, and in the UK, obviously thousands and thousands of miles away from him. I was so close to having Kerwin on the podcast. He was booked in, and then his second child
wow.
was born. So clearly
Oh,
he had priorities at that time that But so yeah, so close yet so far. So, but yeah, what an incredible human being. In terms of your legacy, I have a word here, always better than yesterday. It's called Heartprint, and the word
yeah.
really represents the impact, the lives that we touch, the possibilities that we create in other people's lives. And
Yeah.
Ash, I just wonder whether you've taken a moment to really consider what you hope that your Heartprint will be.
Yeah, look, my hope is that my heartprint is that people go from experiencing life on earth as a living hell to heaven on earth, because I really believe that that's possible for us. And as I said, it's when we transform our minds, when we see each other and ourselves the way that God sees us through that lens of truth, then we really can experience heaven on earth, where we have all the fruits of the spirit of peace and love and joy and patience and kindness and all of those beautiful things. So I feel that the intergenerational healing that brings, breaking off the chains of the pain of the past and breaking off that intergenerational trauma and changing the narrative for humanity. That's a big one, but I feel strongly about it. So I'll do my tiny little part in that, in the bigger picture.
Look, we're 1 of 8 billion, but that's a wonderful contribution to make to the mosaic. It's a joy to be able to help you spread that Heartprint out a little bit further. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your heart, your mind, and I'd be honored if you'd leave us a final thought from your good self.
Oh gosh, my final thought is be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. In this journey, that's the one thing I've had to learn, and it's the one thing that I think makes the biggest difference, is we can do this journey with kindness and gentleness, or we can do this journey with harshness, and just be kind to yourself. It's challenging, but so worth it.
Love it. Ash, thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you for having me.
Hey my friends, thank you for making it to the end. I hope that our time spent together today has left you a little bit better than before you push play. I'd really appreciate if you just took a moment to leave a review to allow me to meet more people where they are and hopefully leave them a little bit better too. If you're curious to know how I, through Always Better Than Yesterday, can serve you, your team, your organisation, then head to alwaysbetterthanyesterday.com to connect. And while you're there, let me know 1 or 2 things that you're going to do as a result of listening to this conversation. I absolutely love hearing your thoughts, your reflections, and the things that this spark in your own heart and mind. If you want more insights from my heart and mind, I do send out short episodes on a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday and Friday, and again, I hope that they serve you well. I appreciate you listening. I'm Ryan Hartley, host of the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast, a podcast for heart-centered leaders just like you. Keep leading, my friends. Always love.